Hi guys, welcome to the Uncovered Podcast. I'm your host Rachel Imani, and this is where we have unfiltered godly conversation. So guys, we haven't been here for a year and a lot has happened. We hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, and I'm so thankful to you guys who have chosen to come on this journey with me. And I want to give you guys more access. I want this to be a vulnerable space. So as you notice, we have Uncovered and not just covered. This is the sister podcast. I took some time after doing season 1, and I feel like God was telling me it's time to share your story. And I was like, well, I've shared my story on my platform before, but there are some new people who haven't heard my story or don't know how God has really impacted my life. And I think that knowing each other's testimonies really does help us to overcome the things that we're going through. So I'm gonna just share. You guys can get your popcorn, you can get your tissues, because it's gonna get very real. Let's get right into it. I grew up in Germantown in Philadelphia, and I grew up in this 3-story house, but there was 10 of us. So a lot of space, not really a lot of space. We didn't have a lot, but we had a lot of love. There was a lot of heart, and I definitely have great memories from my childhood, but that doesn't take away from the fact that we were struggling. My mom was really the rock that really held us together, and she really set a foundation for me and my sisters to succeed because everything was against us, if I'm being honest. My dad struggled with a drug addiction, and that really impacted his presence in my childhood. Though he was in and out, he was a very loving father. And you guys will hear more about him in a minute. But I really want to give a lot of honor to my mom because my mom kept us in the library, in church, and school was the priority. And so I think that she really taught us that our minds and our faith is what we could hold on to despite the circumstances. It was hard. Like, she was a single mom who worked 2 jobs, loved her kids, and never stopped. She really, really made sure that we had everything and we didn't lack. So let's get into my dad. I am certified daddy's girl, like, love him down. But it was an interesting dynamic that we had, kind of uncommon, to the point where sometimes I would go to his NA meetings with him. Narcotics Anonymous, for those of you who don't know. 30 men just like standing, hey, I'm Greg, and I struggle with this. And I'm just sitting there like, la-di-da-di-da, because I just wanted to be around my dad. So those were the dynamics with my parents. And they really did shape who I am. Obviously, you know, having my dad kind of in and out and that push and pull left me with some abandonment issues, some rejection issues, things that came into play later in my life. But I can definitely say that I had a very loving father, and I want to honor him in mentioning that. My mom got remarried, so we moved to Upper Darby. And so this was kind of like the moving on up phase. It was like, now we got a little more stability. I was going to a school out in Glenolden, so I was being bused out there. And it was different. It was diverse. It was nothing I ever seen. In Germantown, it was a lot of people who looked like me, and we were all kind of going through the same things. But in Upper Darby, it was so much diversity. I had neighbors from Vietnam, neighbors from the Philippines. I had neighbors from Africa, just different places. And I was just like, wow, like this is really dope. It expanded my mind a lot. And also, this was the first time that we weren't really missing meals, things like that. So it felt a lot more stable. The hard part is that my mom's husband at the time was not the best man, definitely not someone you would want to trust. And he really took advantage of the fact that it was just my mom, me, and my sisters. And that's not my story to tell, so I always try to handle that with care, but it definitely changed our whole dynamic. And so once that was found out, the things that he was doing, my mom divorced him and we became homeless. And so this was really crazy, going from stable to homeless in like a blink of an eye. And I remember for a summer, I was separated from my sisters and I stayed with a friend, and it was just hard. I didn't know what was going on at home. I didn't know what our situation was. And I remember just getting in the car one day and my mom was like, "So we don't live there anymore." And I was like, "Oh, okay, got it." And that summer we stayed with my godmom. When the school year came, there was a lady from my church who said we can come and live with her. And so we stayed there. And at this time, I was going to Beverly Hills Middle School, and she lived a few blocks away. So that was an interesting like dichotomy because I'm living in a crazy situation. Like we didn't have our own home, but at school I was thriving. I was like a social butterfly, and I kept up appearances. So that's something that I always kind of attribute my style to because I feel like the pressures of keeping up with the trends in middle school, I had to learn how to make things work and make something out of nothing. So that's when I discovered thrifting because at the time Abercrombie and Fitch and Aeropostale were like all the rage, but I couldn't afford that at all. And so I would go to Plato's Closet and then I would find the brands, but they were used and then they would be a little bit cheaper. So that was how I learned how to kind of mask what I was going through because I feel like I was always taught that style was a way that I could just show up in my most confident self, even when my situation was insecure. I remember the day in 8th grade, my mom came to us and she said, "We have a house and it's just gonna be the four of us again." So that's me, my mom, and my two sisters. And that was like the best day ever. I remember it was a big moving truck and we were just like, we finally have our own space, you know, and obviously we were so grateful for everyone who helped us out. But when you're staying with someone, you kind of could feel like a burden. You feel like you're in their space. It's not really your space. So my mom got a house and we moved there and it was so peaceful. Like I remember there was a time we didn't have a couch, but we were so happy. We just were like, okay, we'll sit on the floor. It doesn't matter because it was ours and nobody could come and take it away. So that was like a very pivotal shift to kind of just having that core four, which is what I personally call my mom and my sisters. So we get out of middle school, made it out safely, couple crazy little situations, but made it out pretty like unscathed. And then we go to freshman year of high school. So we get a house, things are pretty stable, and insert my dad back into the story. There was a time where my dad lived with us. My parents weren't together, but he lived with us while he was like developing his trucking business. And my mom and my dad, they were never romantic in front of me. Like I never got to see them as a couple, but I got to see them as friends, and that really like healed something in me. So seeing them like cut it up and laugh on the couch just really like healed my inner child. And it taught me like a great lesson about how important friendship is. And so I'm watching them, and this is the first time in my life I'm living with my dad. The first time I get to see him as I'm like heading out for school, and him just saying like, "I'll see you, Rachel, like I love you." Like that was such a big thing for me as someone who never got to live with my dad. And I also think of it as a grace because shortly after, in January, my dad was hospitalized, and my mom called me and she was like, "Your dad's in the hospital, but he's okay. And we're all here and it's nothing too crazy." She didn't want to worry me because she knew how close we were. And then I was like, okay. I was very concerned, but I was just like, okay. And then in February, my mom called me and she was like, "Your dad died this morning." And I that was the worst day of my life, I could say. Um, it was a rough morning, and I remember it like to a T. I woke up, I was by myself. I heard somebody crying in the shower. I didn't know what was going on, but I just heard somebody crying. I'm like, oh, maybe somebody's going through a breakup. I don't know. It's three girls in the house. Who knows? But when I woke up and my mom called me and she told me that, I just was like, no, no, that can't be. And then I remember I was just screaming, crying. Like, I don't even remember that I was on the phone with my mom. I just remember screaming. And it was like my whole world shattered. And the only way I was able to stop crying is because my mom told me that she hadn't told my sister. And I was like, okay, like, I gotta be strong. Like, I gotta be strong for my family. So I kind of just buttoned myself up, and I learned, I'm not saying this is a healthy thing, but I kind of just learned how to button it up even when things are crumbling. So the next couple weeks were really rough, but somehow, some way, I managed to be in shock. So I wasn't really crying, wasn't really feeling anything. I was just kind of watching everything happen, but I didn't really feel present in myself. I was watching the funeral, planning. I was watching all of the grieving and everybody saying, "Oh, your dad's in a better place," but I wasn't processing it. I was in shock. So I just went back to school 2 weeks later, and everybody's like, "Oh my gosh," and I'm like, "I'm fine." Like, I was like, "I'm okay," but I definitely wasn't. It was too much for me to process, and I just knew that things had to keep rolling. So I went back to school, and it was kind of business as usual, and it remained like that for like 2 years. So once I turned 17, I started to feel that. All of those bottled up emotions, I started to feel them, and I started looking for vices. So that's when I started smoking. That's when I started drinking, started going out a lot. And I don't think anybody really caught on to the shift. I don't think anybody really knew, like, oh, she's grieving her dad, because I think sometimes people think you're done grieving after like a year or so. But it didn't really hit me till 2 years after. And I was outside. I'm not gonna lie. I was like living my life. And I wasn't doing anything too crazy. I wasn't like super promiscuous, but I just never wanted to be at home. So I was going out whenever I could, staying at friends' houses, because I associated home with grief. Everybody in my house was crying. I just didn't want to be there. So that's why I kind of just clung on to the things that were comfortable. And my relationship with God was like non-existent. Um, I just remember thinking, like, if you love me, why would you take my dad? Like, that doesn't make sense. And I couldn't fathom how a loving God could do something like that. So I was just like, I believe you're real, but I'm not really talking to you right now. And I was just doing my own thing. So then I went to college, kind of in that same space. Freshman year of college, I'm like, all right, this is new. I can kind of leave all that grief at home. And like I said before, I was like doing well in school. So I got into the schools I wanted to. I picked Westchester, and I had a great time. Right before my first semester, my best friend, she called me and she said, "Are you going to Westchester?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "You want to live together?" And I was like, "Yes." So that freshman year was one of the best times. Like, we had a ball. And I just remember so much laughter and joy and just undoing of myself and figuring out who I am. And I went to therapy for the first time. I was just like, okay, I'm away from my family. I have a little time to process, and it was all hitting me. So I was like, okay, let's go get some therapy. So I went to the therapy office. I said, I need someone. Like, hook me up with somebody quickly. And it was my first time going to therapy, and it was a great experience, which I know is a privilege. It was a great experience, younger white girl, and we just bonded, and she really helped me to talk through and process all the grief I had gone through, and just some of the dynamics that weren't healthy in my family, but I didn't know, or maybe I had gotten used to. So went to therapy. I'm like, okay, I'm thriving. Like, life is good. I go home for winter break, and I just had this like New Year's resolution, like, I'm gonna go on a date. I hadn't talked to anybody. I'd never really had like a boyfriend. So at that time, I just was like, oh, I just want to go on a date just to go. So I asked this guy. He said yes. And we planned the date. And we were going to go. And everything was working out. The beginning of the date was fine. No problems, no issues. Like, everything was flowing. It seemed to be like some chemistry there. But I wasn't looking for anything serious. And then towards the middle of the date, there was like a gap of time that we had to fill before we went out to eat. And in that time, we went back to his house, which was on campus, and he lived with his roommates. And that's where things started to kind of unravel. I'm thinking we're just passing time, but I think that we just kind of had two different outcomes of this date. And he was very focused on getting his way, and that was a situation that really I wasn't prepared for. I thought, like, I had my guards down, and when that happened, I really wasn't prepared, and I wasn't able to protect myself, and that really affected my womanhood, all the things in my mind about myself. I felt like I've always been this strong woman, but I wasn't able to find my voice in that moment. And that really impacted me. And it made me just question everything. I was like, okay, this lifestyle I'm living, going out, drinking, smoking, it's not getting me results. And at the time, it felt comfortable, but that experience woke me up. So after that happened, I went back to therapy for I needed a whole nother semester just to process. So I went back to therapy and worked through that. But that was the start of the shift from me being like, I'm living however I want, to, okay, I need to get some grounding. And that kind of led me back to God. So I opened up my Bible. I said, okay, I need something real. I can't do the cliche, the corny. I can't do the little scripture of the day. I can't do like the cheesy stuff. I need something real. And I opened Romans, and I just fell in love with the book. I just read every single chapter. I just kept going. I couldn't get enough of it. And it was something about the way that Paul wrote it that felt so real. And it wasn't the Christianity that I had experienced before. And I really resonated with Paul. And I was like, okay, this I can deal with, because I need to understand how this God is loving, how he truly has a plan for my life. Because when my dad died, I was like, there will never be a happy outcome. So I read through Romans, and that was the beginning of me rebuilding my faith. That was the book. Now reading it, it's bittersweet. I just love to go back and think about how it really pulled me out of a lot of things. There were also some other things that helped me: art therapy, just having friends and being around community. During the pandemic, like, my family really like came together, and it was nice to live with my sisters again. So there were a couple things that grounded me during that time, but that's when I really came back to God. And ever since then, my relationship with him has grown. He's shown himself to be a father. And one of the most pivotal times that he showed up for me was when I graduated from college. To give you a little backstory, a little context, I never expected that I would be able to go to college. And that is something that would be shocking to a lot of people. But I didn't see it as something that was feasible. Like, I grew up in poverty. I'm like, who's going to pay for this? I don't understand how I'm supposed to get there. So I thought that I had like a ceiling. And then when I made it to college, I'm like, wait, whew, I'm here. But I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was like, somebody's going to come in and be like, hey, your tuition payment didn't go through. You got to go. But they never did. And I made it all the way through. And I get to the end and I'm like, whoa, this is really happening. Like, this is the best, like, feeling that I felt. Like, I really felt like I accomplished something. My sister and I are first generation graduates. So it really made me feel like this different type of pride that I never felt. Right before Christmas break, I get an email that's like, you're not cleared to graduate. And I was like, excuse me? And mind you, it's Christmas break, so there's no one there. Nobody can like answer their emails. Everybody's on vacation. I'm like, there's no way. Because I went to my advisor and then I went to the head of the advisors. I said, I have all my credits. You're not about to do this to me. But they were like, yeah, you're missing 3 credits. So I was missing 1 class. So I'm like, okay, y'all trying to take me out. I said, I cannot afford another semester of school. There's just no way that I'm gonna be able to do this. So I go through all my old transcripts and I'm just like, I need to find a class. Fortunately, I was able to take some classes when I was in high school. I took some night classes. So I'm like digging up transcripts from like 3-4 years ago, trying to make something shake. And I'm sending them in and I'm just waiting. And something that I know about myself is I'm not the most patient person. So this Christmas break is like taking me out. And I'm just like, they'll get back to you. You're going to graduate. Don't worry. So Christmas break is over. I come back. I get an email and they accepted one of my old classes as the credits that I was missing so that I could graduate. And I was like, God, I know that you're real, because that was crazy. Like I knew that I was graduating and they were like, absolutely not. And that just made me like, no, like I knew that I knew like, okay, God is real. He's on my side. He wants me to succeed. And so I graduated and that was like such a big moment because it just felt like everything that we had gone through was not for nothing. When I look at my sisters and I now, it's like night and day from how we grew up. I look at it as a miracle that we are all able to say we're accomplished, we went to school, we are not in toxic relationships, none of us have a substance abuse problem. These are things that could have happened. Like if you look at everything in our lives on paper, you would think, well, surely somebody's gonna be in an abusive relationship, which is something that ran in my family. Surely they're not gonna make it through school. But God was the one who truly covered my family. And that was when I started to realize, okay, you had a plan all along. Like I could trust you. So looking at my life now, I'm 25 and I am experiencing so much joy. And I think about the time when I was 17 and I didn't want to be at home. I didn't want to live. I just did not want any part of this life. And it just makes me think like, thank God I didn't choose not to be here. Because if I had seen the glory and the joy that I'm experiencing now, I wouldn't believe that it was real. And I wouldn't believe that it could be for me. So that's why I'm so confident that this testimony is something that someone needs to hear, because I know that when I was in that space, I just didn't think it would ever get good again. So I say that to say, if there's anyone who is going through something right now, whether it be a life trial, a breakup, been through them, school problems, work problems, anything like that, I just want to encourage you that there is a plan for your life and that God will make sure that he finishes the work that he started in you. And thinking about it, I'm just like, wow, God, like I'm a living testimony and I have this story. and I don't want to hold it because there's someone who needs it. So looking at what I'm doing now in my life, I'm like, okay, I can trust you. And I hope that anybody watching this is just given that little mustard seed of faith. Like, maybe I can trust God because I saw what he did for Rachel. So that is my story, guys. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for staying this long to hear it. And I really just want you guys to feel like you're a part of this journey. You guys are going to see me talk about some really tricky topics. We're going to talk about trauma. We're going to talk about mental health. We're going to talk about dating. We're going to talk about friendship. And I don't want this to be a space where we just have the polished conversation. I want to be unfiltered. I want to ask the questions that we're scared to ask. I want to just explore these topics in an unfiltered way that still holds reverence for God. And I want to look through the word and find the truth and God's plan for each of these things. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, stay covered. Oh my gosh, what the freak? Oh my gosh, I want to disappear for a little bit.